Well, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Heidi Roth, and I'm the presenter today. Our topic today is work-life balance. So thank you so much for joining me here today. Just a quick reminder that if you have not muted yourself, I'm just going to go ahead and mute all the participants. Just a reminder to mute yourself. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Let's get started. So work-life balance. Our agenda for today is we're going to be talking about some challenges and opportunities with work-life balance, working smarter, staying productive, our best working from home environment if we're working from home, and then focusing on the life part of work-life balance. So let's dive in. So work-life balance, I'm curious, is there such a thing? Many people have different opinions on this. Some people say, no, there is no such thing as work-life balance. It's either you're focusing more on work or you're focusing more on family or your life. I like to think that there is such a thing as a work-life balance, but now that we're all at home during a pandemic, things have changed a little bit, right? And what we thought was maybe a work-life balance before has been, we've been presented with some new challenges and opportunities. I came across this on Twitter and I thought this just encapsulated where we are, at least where I feel like I am so well. This is a scientist mom and she was interviewed on CNN, and there you can see with her professional background, and she's got her gold little blazer on here and looks very professional, right? And so she posted on Twitter, she said, this is what this is what was going on in the background. So there she is presenting, she's got her gold blazer on, and this was the wall behind her, but you can see, everything that's going on in the background. And she was pretty brave for sharing this, right? And so I like, she did a follow-up Twitter, post saying, look, kids, your toys in our disaster living room made BuzzFeed. So, how many of us feel like maybe this is us here, right? And we're trying to figure out now with the pandemic and working from home, how to balance all of this. So there are a lot of challenges and there are a lot of opportunities as well. There are less boundaries regarding work hours. This can be a good thing, this can be a bad thing. Less boundaries between personal and professional lives. I think we've probably seen a lot more now of people's intimate lives now, right? We're seeing their kids, their dogs, their families, their spouses, partners. There's a lot, in some cases, a lot less boundaries. There's a lot of opportunities, right? We're saving money on travel and meal costs, perhaps, because maybe we're not in the office anymore. Perhaps we're saving time in commuting. For those that are working at home, maybe up to 80 hours a month extra. And maybe we're thinking about doing some workations, which is a new word trending now. Maybe we're traveling someplace exotic, and now that we have the opportunity to work from home, maybe it doesn't have to be home. There's a lot of new remote work visas. You can go work in Bermuda, they'll let you work there for a year, or Barbados, and all kinds of unique opportunities. But really, when we talk about work-life balance, one of the things that we always want to start with is to ask ourselves some fundamental questions on what are our goals in life? What matters most to us? Are we spending our time on what's really important and what really matters? Are we happy? What's essential and what's not? And in our work life, as well as in our home life, are our goals realistic? Maybe we need to go back and maybe readjust some of our goals to what life really is. And what can we let go of to simplify? And really, by being very clear on all these things can really help us then manage our balancing out that work in life. So let's start first with, when we talk about work-life balance, one of the things that we have the opportunity to do now, and perhaps the challenge, is work a little smarter and to stay productive. And with helping us balance that, with working smarter, we will have more time for our life outside of work. So let's start with that. Now, just one thing that I wanted to mention too, I have the Zoom group chat open in the corner. And so I would love to hear from all of you. If you have a question, a comment, please feel free to, put it in the group chat. You can even message me privately if you don't want everyone to know the question that you asked, but it's kind of nice to have that interaction as well with everyone. So, okay, there's 168 hours in the week. Now, ideally, we take about 56 hours of those for sleep, and maybe we do 56 hours for work. Now, you might say, well, there's only 40 hours in a work week, but we're being pretty generous here. So, maybe you're still commuting, maybe under that work time, we can take time in terms of getting ready for work, right? Showering, getting dressed, whatnot. But at the end of the day, we have 56 hours that we're not sleeping and we're not working. That's actually a lot of time. So what are we doing with all that time? And how can we focus on, separating out that work time and that lifetime? One of the things that, that we, as I had mentioned, that we want to make sure we understand is that we actually have more time than we think. So this is based on the work of Laura Vanderkam. She's a great author. She has a 7-minute blog or podcast that she does every morning. She's got a blog. And she really says, track your time. We all have blind spots. And if we want to use our time better, figure out where it's going. And this is really great. You can, she recommends doing a 15-minute calendar for the day. And you can even go to her website and download, and chunk it out in 15 minutes where all your time is going. And so it helps you to understand, number one, how many hours a week am I working? Because now, potentially with working at home, we might not have any idea of how many hours we're working. It might be a lot less than 40. And most likely it's going to be a lot more than 40. People are actually working a little bit more now. But, if we don't track it, it's hard to understand. I'm seeing a note from someone in the group chat, and yes, the PowerPoint will be available. We can certainly be happy to share that. Okay. So another thing now with working smarter and being a little bit more productive to make sure that we have time for our life outside of work is to set clear goals on what we need to do. Not, I need to do a web page, right? Which can be overwhelming. I have a big, huge work project to manage. So overwhelming. We want to set reasonable expectations for the day. And one of these things is to use the Eisenhower matrix. I'm curious, is anyone familiar with the Eisenhower matrix? Feel free to put it in the group chat. But maybe people are more familiar with this from Stephen Covey, also referred to this a lot. And what is that? This is what's called the Eisenhower Box or the Eisenhower Matrix. And Dwight D. Eisenhower was an amazing general during World War II and really, gets a lot of credit for, planning D-Day and all of that. And so he would, chunk out his time into what was important and not important. And under important, what was urgent and what was not urgent. And this little graph right here is James Clear is the one who put this together. James Clear is also another author that writes a lot about productivity, and he wrote a book called Atomic Habits. If you're not familiar with it, it's also a great book. But he in putting this little box together, he says, what's important and what's urgent, and that's the things that we want to do now. The things that are not only important but urgent. But we also want to have time on our calendar for the things that are not urgent. These are sometimes the things that get pushed back, right? And so now if we schedule it on our calendar, a time to do these things, we're more likely to do it, right? Whether it's exercising, calling friends and family, our long-term strategy for our work, whatever, if it's work or life, the more you are likely to put it on your calendar and schedule it, the more likely you are to do it. We actually we make better decisions for our future selves than we do our current selves. And so by putting it on the calendar, we're likely to do it. Sometimes the things that are not urgent, we don't always get to, right? And then we spend time on things that are urgent but not important, right? So whether it's answering, maybe, answering certain emails, this is a little bit outdated now, scheduling interviews and booking flights, and then, of course, we all spend time perhaps on things that are not urgent and not important. So try, and that's the box that we want to get rid of, right? Delete it. So do the things that are important and urgent now. Decide and schedule a time when you're going to do things that are important but not urgent. And then, figure out the things that are urgent but maybe not important. Can you delegate it to somebody? And then, of course, delete it. So better time management, we had talked about, delegating things, not overcommitting, eliminating some of the time wasters, right? And even just putting a Post-it. I have various Post-its of little inspiring quotes that kind of, I take off my calendar from week to week and I put it on the next page. But, things like what matters most in my life. Lately, the Post-it that's really kind of resonating with me is, at the end of the day, when I go to bed, what am I going to be proud of that I accomplished today? And it can be something work related, it can be something family related, whatever it might be. I tend to be a procrastinator. There might be some procrastinators out there. So, trying to do the worst things first, using momentum. When we get started on things, we're much more likely to do it, right? And then even there's the Pomodoro Method. You may or may not be familiar with the Pomodoro Method. This is blocking chunks of time in 25 minutes. Some people work best in chunks of 25 minutes. Some people it's actually 50 minutes. So figuring out what's better for you is good. But then setting a timer and working during that time and knowing at the end that you give yourself a 5-minute break to stretch, to do whatever. It's called the Pomodoro Method because the person who invented it was Italian and had a little tomato timer, and the Italian word for tomato is Pomodoro. And so hence the Pomodoro Method. One thing to keep in mind too, as for our work life, is just, that remote communication, we miss a lot of body language with it. And, even our close friends can get confused on Zoom calls, what we really do mean. There's, you can hide a lot of emotions and delay it. And we all are getting a little bit of Zoom fatigue. So also, as you try and figure out your best, productive life in your work life, how can you combat some of that Zoom fatigue? And some of it might just be going back to regular calls. Does it have to be a Zoom meeting? Could you just even do a quick phone call? Maybe you just even have an open door policy, and just, where you let your colleagues and coworkers know, hey, during, 2 to 3 o'clock, call me whenever you want. I'm available for calls. And, if I can't take your call right away, I'll call you right back. But this can be helpful too, just to, sometimes it's just much faster to do a phone call than to schedule meetings, back and forth. When are we going to do this phone call? Just, having that open door policy can save some time. And then lastly, with emails, it's interesting. There is a law in France that was enacted a couple of years ago that bars work emails after hours. So after, and I'm not sure exactly what the time was, but, 6 o'clock at the end of the workday, you by law, are forbidden from, engaging in work emails. And so, this, as we'll find out, this might have been a great policy for us in regular life. But now that we're working from home, many of us are maybe changing our schedules, and maybe, we're blocking chunks of time. We're working first thing in the morning, and maybe now we have decided to work, from 10 to 12 at night. Maybe that's the time that works best for us, and it works for our company. And so, it's just really good to be clear with your coworkers what your email policy is. Are you fine with emails after 10 p.m.? Will you answer them? Or, should all of your coworkers expect that after 6 o'clock you're done? And if you're done after 6, or you're done after 5, or whatever time that you declare yourself to be done, making sure that everyone understands that, and being clear with yourself what your policy is also. And then 2, managing interruptions. Every time we get interrupted, it takes us, some studies say that it can take us up to 25 minutes to get back on track with a project after we've been interrupted. So that's a lot of time. So trying to avoid multitasking wherever possible. So if we are working from home, are we working, or are we kind of managing the family at the same time? And being very clear with who's ever in the household with you, that these are the times where I'm working and I do not want to be disturbed, unless someone's bleeding or the house is on fire, or, whatever it is. If you have kids, teaching them the urgent versus non-urgent. And, maybe if something's not urgent, maybe they have a little ask me later notebook where they can write down everything, that they want to ask you later. Maybe you have, for smaller kids, maybe you have a little activity box that, when they really feel like they want to come and talk to you, or they're bored or whatever, they can go to the activity box and do some things instead of interrupting you. Because if you've declared from 12 to 1 you are working, the door is closed, maybe you even put a sign on the door, do not enter until after 1 o'clock, whatever it might be. Now, let's say that they really do need to interrupt you. How do you want to handle interruptions? If you do allow interruptions, do you want them just to knock on the door and say, excuse me, a piece of paper? How would you prefer with your family to manage those interruptions? And keeping in mind too, that you're working from home, you're not living at your office. So whatever you can do to separate out kind of that workspace and that family space, that home space, is going to be helpful. Separating out the work time and free time, so that we're not always kind of juggling from minute to minute, back to work, back to, because if we're kind of answering emails all night long, on our phone, we never really feel like we've gotten a break and we've gotten away from work. And a big part of managing that work-life balance is, those clear delineations of when work is and when our life is. So having those separate work and life areas or living areas can go a long way too, in terms of helping your brain understand. Our brain definitely has different cues to let us know what we should be doing at a certain time, right? When we walk into the kitchen, sometimes our brain is cued to say, oh, it's time to eat. And we might not have wanted a snack, but when we walk into the kitchen and when maybe we see the fruit on the counter, we think, oh, a snack would be nice. When we walk into our bedroom, hopefully we're cued to, oh, it's time for sleep. There's my bed. I sleep in my bed. And, that's one of the ways of getting good sleep. But we also, want to make sure that, our brain understands, are we working, or is this living area? So it can be difficult, but as much as possible, here's a lovely little office that somebody carved out of a closet, and maybe that's, the best you can do if you are working from home, in terms of carving out that working zone. But trying as much as possible to have those different zones of the house can be really helpful. Keeping in mind ergonomics too, as we're working out of our home offices and maybe even at our work office, but being very careful that we are not maybe working out of our bed or working on the sofa all day long, because you can get into some really bad practices that can lead to low back pain. I have a couple friends that are in HR, and according to my friends in HR, this now working from home has caused a lot of problems with people, because people are working out of their sofas, and now all of a sudden they're getting all these claims for like back pain and issues of people maybe not with correct ergonomics. So remember, try to keep good posture in your chair, feet flat on the floor. If your feet don't touch the floor, I'm actually doing this out of my husband's office today. And so now my feet are not touching the floor, I'm realizing, because he's, taller than me. So what I should have done is, rearrange the chair beforehand. But also too, being careful not to hunch over your computer. Your head weighs about an average of 9 pounds. And, the further it's out from your body, the more of a stress that's going to place on your neck. So keeping that in mind, making sure that your monitor is about arm's length away, giving your eyes a break. If we're on the computer all day long, making sure that you look every 20 minutes, you look up for about 20 seconds and you focus on something that's about 20 feet away. So that's also, very important as well. And then just, kind of remembering some quick stretches during the day so that you're not hunched over all day long. I like to take my arms and kind of put them behind me, do that pec and, stretching out our pectorals and our chest. Maybe you do some overhead stretches, some shoulders and kind of, stretch them that way. Your hands, believe it or not, and your wrists really need, your forearms need a lot of stretches too. So all really important that you do during the day. And then just really quickly too, some hacks to boost productivity. Because we are working from home, potentially many of us, it's really nice. We don't have to be at a 9-to-5 job. So, where before maybe we just kind of came in and punched the clock and, it didn't really matter if you're productive or not. Now, while we're working from home, it actually matters more than ever that we're productive, because if we can get a lot of stuff done, then we can really disconnect and feel like, hey, I had a great day. I really kind of crushed it at work. I am unplugging and I'm not feeling guilty about it at all, because I was really, really productive today. And so that's kind of, one of the things that we want to think about too. Managing by task, not by time, right? We don't have to punch in that 9-to-5 perhaps anymore. So how can we get these tasks done? What's the most efficient way of achieving the desired result? For example, for meetings, maybe you have a lot of meetings today. Be very clear on what's the agenda, who really needs to be on the call, and what will everyone on the call be doing for every minute that they are there. Perhaps with Zoom calls, it does to some extent maybe boost productivity, because people, have to be on the call, have to be engaged. But then at the end of the meeting, reflect on what went well and what didn't. Was there someone that didn't need to be there? Did you need to be there? Can you get out of going to, that meeting the next time? And really being really careful with your time, that you're not spending all this endless time on Zoom calls, right? Or even on phone call meetings. This was an article from the Harvard Business Review, and one of the things that, was interesting, the quote was, of all the things that can boost emotions, motivation, and perceptions during a workday is making progress in meaningful work. And the more people experience that sense of progress, the more likely they are likely to be creative in the long run, right? And so feeling like we're getting stuff done, having those small little wins, can really help to boost our productivity as well as our creativity. So, when we talk about time as well, it's really good to understand and to be aware of that as humans, we have different times during the day when we're most productive. And our mood actually rises and falls along with this too. It typically, for most people, we tend to have the best mood and most productive, typically during the morning. That tends to fall around 2 to about 5 o'clock. Now, I think most of us, had I asked you at what time of day are you least productive, what's the hardest time for you during the day, I think across the board, almost all of you would have said 2 to 3 o'clock, 2 to 4 o'clock, right? That's kind of the dead zone where we're not all that productive. We're not doing all that much. And then our mood and our creativity actually rises again in the evening. And so kind of understanding, when are we most productive? When can we get the most stuff done? Perhaps now with working from home, we can really take advantage of this. And maybe we chunk our workday that we're working in the morning when we're really productive. And then maybe in this, kind of dead zone here, maybe we're spending more time with the family and then going back to work, at night, of course, if work allows it. But even if, even on a regular 9 to 5 workday, keeping in mind that morning time, be very careful how you spend your morning hours. If you've determined that that's your most productive time, guard that really carefully, that you're not spending it on useless meetings or things that didn't need to be done, right? That productive time for most people, is good for analyzing data, writing, doing reports, doing stuff that you've been procrastinating, because maybe it's a little bit of a harder thing to do. The trough, that kind of 12 to 5, if 4 o'clock-ish, depending on, based on our circadian rhythms, can you maybe answer emails during this time, routine phone calls, and then, the recovery is good for high degree of creativity. So how can, if you have kids at home, how could you make this work? Maybe during the trough, you answer emails, but you do it at the table with your kids while they're doing their homework. Or maybe they're on a Zoom call at the same time, and maybe you're, kind of answering some routine emails. So, when we talk about separating out work and family and work and life, maybe this would be a time where maybe some things could kind of be bunched together a little bit more, depending on what works for you. A productivity hack for me that has been life-changing is something called FocusMate. So I work, I've been working out of my home for the past 10 plus years. So, and with kids at home, so I kind of got the work life, working from home kids. I feel like I have been experiencing that for quite a while. But FocusMate, it's probably new to me since the pandemic, but what it is that you set a time to, it's a website, focusmate.com. And here you can see, here I am, I'm at the bottom here, and this is my person that I'm matched up with. And basically what it is it's a time where you say from 10, and they're 50-minute long sessions. And what this website does is it matches you up with somebody else that is going to work during that time too. And so I know for like a 50-minute chunk of time, you meet with a person beforehand, you tell them what you're going to work on, and literally it takes like 5 or 10 seconds. And then you say, okay, let's work on it. And really, then you kind of go to a different screen and you don't see them. They don't really see you. But if you want to, you can always go back and see them working there as well. And for that 50-minute time, somebody is working along with you. So it's social pressure because you've said, somebody's somewhat maybe watching you. There's that intention setting. It's task specific. You have to say what you're going to do. And then there's accountability at the end where you meet back up again and you say, hey, this is what we're doing. So I would love to know, has anyone heard of this before, or is anyone doing this? Because for me, it has been really life-changing. There's strict rules. There's zero tolerance for not following. So I know it maybe sounds a little creepy and weird, but I have actually branched out and met people on this that now I don't even do FocusMate so much anymore. I have my own sessions with them. So from 1 to 3 o'clock today, I have a session with a woman out in California that I met, doing this. But, basically we all act differently when we know we're being watched. So, if anyone is doing this, or I'd love to hear, do you think this is weird? Would you never do this? Some of my friends, when I first told them about this, they thought it was really strange. But, you do you, and I do me, and this really, I feel has really worked really well for me. Okay. Last thing when we talk about productivity is that we want to make sure that we're exercising. So important for so many reasons. Here, this was done with kids. This is a brain scan of kids before and after with exercise and no exercise. And it works for us as adults too. But here, these red and green areas are the most active, the most amplified, is the term that they used. During this amplification, where researchers studied this during these brain scans, they found that after exercise, these kids' brains were so active and were able to concentrate and focus. And with no exercise, you can see a big difference in that amplitude, and which would, their brains weren't working as hard and weren't as active and able to focus as well. So, and did not do as well on cognitive tasks. So just keeping that in mind, trying to get out first thing in the morning, maybe getting some exercise, however it works for you is really important. Okay, so let's talk about the life part of it, balancing life. Letting go of the guilt and the perception that everything has to be perfect. When we talk about maybe our family lives, our home life, whatever it might be, letting it go. You can see here, I'm not going to break into song, don't worry. My kid, when I was putting these slides together, I was singing the song and my kids were like, Mom, you're not going to do that on the webinar, are you? No, I'm not, don't worry about it. But what can we let go of that's not serving us? And that doesn't need to be done, whether it's actual, literally chores and tasks, or, that guilt, maybe figuratively letting things go. Both is really important. And having some compassion for ourselves. Many of us are stressed, right? And we're trying to do the best that we can during this pandemic, during this, unprecedented time we keep hearing about, right? So how can we be compassionate and kind to ourselves? And especially if we have kids, are your kids fed? Are they clothed? Are they housed? Are they provided with the tools needed for school? Do they have everything that they need to succeed, whether it's in person or remote? Are they hugged daily and told that you love them daily? You know what? Good job. Wonderful. You've done a great job. That's, what studies show is the most important thing. Just really making sure that we're doing that self-care is really important too. We're eating a healthy diet. We're getting some sun and fresh air every day, and whether it's exercising or just getting out and getting some fresh air and sun is really important. Getting enough sleep. There's so much stuff going on in the media nowadays. Maybe for those with maybe smaller kids, maybe you're too busy to even go on the media, and maybe that's a good thing. But you really want to make sure to, as much as possible, that whether it's social media or whatever type of media that you're consuming, that you really maybe take a chance to really unplug. That you're making time for some hobbies, for some fun, and connecting with those around you. Spending time with your family, spending time with your children, and really, whether it's connecting via a Zoom call, text, via phone call, whatever connection, whether socially distant, barbecues or cocktails or whatever it is, that you're really kind of making sure that you're taking time for that self-care is so important. Also, setting a schedule. Well, typically we talk about this when we talk about kids, right? Kids thrive on routine, but guess what? As adults, we do too. And really, studies have shown that especially for sleep, it's really kind of important to have somewhat of the same sleeping and waking schedule. So trying not to, one night going to bed at 1 a.m, and then the next night you say, oh my gosh, I got to bed too late last night, so I'm going to go to bed at 9:30 tonight. And then, oh, that was too early, so the next night is 11. As much as possible, having that sleep-wake schedule that you're not more than half an hour off, on weekdays versus weekends. You know, having some boundaries, especially with kids, having that general playtime, mealtime, bedtime makes children feel secure. But to some extent, it, you know, those kind of regular meal times and a little bit of a schedule can be really helpful with us too. We no longer, many of us no longer have those, you know, exogenous source of a schedule, right? We don't have the outside world telling us, oh, we have to be at work now. It's time to catch the train. It's time to catch the bus. It's time to, you know, do all those different things. Now that the kids are back in school a little bit more, but you know, for many of us that has changed. This is from Gretchen Rubin. Gretchen Rubin is a wonderful author, great podcast and blog, and you know, I'm a huge fan of her work. But she shared these 10 tips for sharing parenting duties and workspaces that I feel like she has a lot of good things here. Taking advantage of everyone's different energy levels. So like we talked about, when is your best energy level? Can you get the most stuff accomplished during that time? And, you know, if you are co-parenting, you know, with your spouse, how can you divide all that up so you're both, you know, taking advantage of those best times for you? Being explicit about assignments, you know, whether it's the family assignment, who's going to do what. This is a big one. Dividing duties rather than to share them. You know, so, you know, in some cases it works to divide duties, right? You make dinner, you know, every other night, and I'll make dinner every other night. But someone told me this long ago, and I think it's really served us well in our family. If you do have a, you know, partner and a spouse or even a roommate, whatever your situation might be, there are some things that are more important to some people versus other people. And so in our family, my husband and I had always these arguments about the lawn, because for me, the lawn at the time, don't really care about it all that much anymore, but at the time, you know, the lawn was important to me, to have a nice lawn. And so I was always nagging him like, hey, you know, are you going to water the lawn? And when are you going to mow the lawn? And the lawn looks a little dry, and, you know, there's some weeds. And I remember I was complaining about it to a friend, and she said, why is he in charge of the lawn? He doesn't care about the lawn. You know, just because he's the man doesn't mean that he should be in charge of the lawn. The person who cares about it more should be the one who's in charge of it. And I was like, you're totally right. And so, you know, now the lawn became my responsibility. Doesn't look all that much greater, but, you know, I hired True Green, I hired someone to cut it. And, you know, so it's just, you know, an example that maybe you can think of in your household, what's important to you. And maybe you're the one that's in charge of that. And so the person that they care about it the most should be the one in charge. And maybe that's how you kind of divide things rather than right down the middle. You know, rearranging your space. We had talked about, you know, carving out that kind of workspace. Coordinating calendars is really important, especially if you have important Zoom calls, you know, that you need the house to be quiet for, you know, those do not disturb periods. Get some noise canceling ear phones, you know, it can be really, really helpful too. And above all, you know, keeping your sense of humor and remembering love and remembering, you know, what is really important to you. At the end of the day, what's important. You know, can you know, what kind of efficiencies can you manage to work in as well? You know, can you plan as many meals for the week as possible? Can you cook some big meals and freeze them? There is nothing better than pulling out like some chili that you made maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, you know, and having it, you know, for lunch or for dinner. Cooking those big meals, cooking a big pot of chicken soup, whatever it might be. Finding healthy takeout places. You know, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And this is something I tell myself all the time because, you know, in addition to a coach, I'm also a dietitian. And so for me, you know, it's important to have, you know, a really, really nutritious meal every single night. But, you know, once again, sometimes you just got to go with good enough, right? And two, having your children maybe be in charge of a couple meals per week if you do have kids. Enlisting your kids to help. Kids can and they should help. Many kids, they have more time now as well, since they don't have as many perhaps sports and after school activities, and all of our schedules maybe are a little bit pared down. And even if your child has crazy sports, I know some people still have same amount of sports, but every child should have 5 or 10 minutes a day where they can help. And you work all day, so it's important that your kids understand that, it's kind of the whole family's responsibility to kind of, help out. So what kind of age appropriate chores can you give your kids? What, maybe for all kids, it might not be cooking dinner. That might be some more of like the tweens and teenagers. But what kind of, if emptying the dishwasher, setting the table, making sure that kind of everyone in the household helps. This will be something for kids with kids, people with kids maybe have heard, I'm bored. And, when our kids were much smaller, whenever I would hear this, I would say, that is wonderful. I've been needing some help with this chore. And go to the chore jar, and we'd have like a little list of different chores that they could do. And so, they very quickly learned not to tell me I'm bored. But boredom is a good thing. It really kind of fosters some creativity and resourcefulness in kids. Sometimes maybe not all the creativity that you're looking for. So you do have to be a little bit careful with that. But it can be a good thing in terms of helping them, take care of themselves. Sometimes you hear maybe I'm hungry, and even for us as adults, if we are working out of the house, packing lunch and snacks for the day, so that exactly in the morning, you're not tempted to maybe snack on some things that you didn't want to. Can you put yourself a little snack basket together? Can you ready pack your lunch in the morning, maybe for your kids, maybe for yourself, whatever it might be? Teaching your kids some easy snacks to make, ants on a log or berries with special sauce. Special sauce in our house was basically yogurt with a little bit of sour, and sometimes sour cream, but a little bit of brown sugar and vanilla mixed in, and then you pour it over the berries. So whatever it might be, keeping in mind and remembering that we make better decisions for our future selves than our current self. And then, just in the last 2 minutes that we have left here, making sure as much as possible that you're getting organized, eliminating clutter. This can go so far to helping you feel a little bit less stressed. We don't understand sometimes how much clutter can kind of make us stressed. And we all have different, what might be clutter to you is not clutter to me, but we all have our own thresholds for what feels good and what doesn't. And so, trying as much as possible to do that. Now that the kids are back in school, maybe they're hybrid, maybe they're going 2 days a week, but, try to lay out clothes, get back in that routine of packing lunches, packing our work bags and backpacks, whatever it might be the night before, as much as possible, trying to get organized. And then lastly, remember, putting your own oxygen mask on first. We had talked about that self-care, but, it's worth a reminder. We can't take care of others. We can't do our best in terms of work or life if we're not, to some extent, taking care of ourselves and making time for ourselves to rejuvenate, to recharge, however it might look for us. Because if we don't do that, we're not going to necessarily succeed all that well, with our family and our children, or at work. So that's, probably really an important thing. So we are out of time. That is the end of our webinar today. And certainly, if anyone has any questions or comments, I'd love to hear about it feel free to use the chat box to ask a question. If you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, that would be lovely as well. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And, hopefully you got some good tips. And if there's something that especially resonated with you or that you liked, let me know. It's always nice to have that feedback. So I appreciate it. Oh, thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Be well.
It's you.
All right. We'll see you, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.